Hello, Tom Dinas here from the Delicious Legacy. If you want the episodes early and ad-free, please subscribe to my Patreon page. If you go to www.patreon.com/The Delicious Legacy, you can subscribe from $3 a month. Hello, my curious archaeogastronomers. My name is Tom Dinas, and this is the Delicious Legacy Podcast. Welcome back to another archaeogastronomical adventure. Thanks for tuning in. On today's episode, I'm having as a guest a giant of the Spanish food and wine movement. She probably single-handedly brought the Basque cuisine into the limelight of the English-speaking world. María José Sevilla has worked for many years in the field of food and wine. And she's a cook, obviously, a writer and broadcaster. And I've seen her in countless things on TV, from BBC with Rick Stein and her own programs, doing documentaries about Spanish food and culture and people. And she has been at the center of the discovery or rediscovery of the Spanish cuisines by chefs and food writers throughout the world, and especially in the UK. We caught up and had a chat, discussing a new edition of her book, the paperback edition that's coming out now of Delicioso, A History of Food in Spain. And also, he has a brand new book out, La Cocina Vasca, which is recipes and traditions of the Spanish Basque country. So with that in mind, we had a very interesting, in-depth and broad discussion about what is Spanish food, the influences through the millennia, and how we ended up with Spanish cuisine being so famous and well-renowned all over the world, especially considering the difficulties in the 20th century and the poor state of the economy throughout the 20th century, and the widespread poverty across the general population for many decades after World War II. Of course, Spanish food has changed beyond recognition in the last 2 decades at least, and in the hands of certain modern gastronomic chefs such as Ferran Adrià and also the Basque cuisine in general, but also the majority of Spaniards are still enjoying the food of their ancestors. A simple plate of lentils and chorizo, a roasted lamb, a tuna fish, and things that they've been cooking for hundreds and hundreds of years. So Maria, as an exceptionally passionate explorer of the rich culinary landscapes of Spain, a vast country with many different regions and regional cuisines, I was delighted that we met and talked about everything Spanish food related, from the aromatic kitchens of Andalusia to the Galician fish traditions. So let's get straight to our episode. Sit back, relax, and enjoy our flavored journey through Spain. María José Sevilla, welcome to the Delicious Legacy Podcast.
Well, I'm very happy to be here.
Actually, thank you for inviting me into your home.
Well, I'm very glad that you're here. So
Fantastic. I would like to ask you, first of all, a little bit about yourself.
Okay. Well, I was born in Madrid a long time ago. And I came to London almost to spend 3 months. And I have been here for 53 years.
Wow.
I got married to an English man and I had a child. And within 2.5 years, I felt that I needed to do something more. I was a little bit lonely at the beginning. You know, it's quite difficult for a Spaniard to be without our families. And although I had a new family, I was missing tremendously the culture and my family ambience. But anyway, little by little, I found somehow I found a job at the Spanish embassy. And originally it was to do with my background in economics. So it was not dealing with food at the beginning, but it was, because it was dealing with the Spanish entry into the European community and the trade between the UK and Spain of fresh produce. And then I was doing that for 2 or 3 years. Then I was going to leave. I thought I had enough. And I was offered a very interesting job. So I thought, well, let's try. And the very interesting job was to do with the opening in London of a government promotional center to promote Spanish food and wine. I was given a small department, but for me it was very interesting. It was the information department at the embassy for the promotion of food and wine. So I met, little by little, I started meeting lots of journalists, people involved, and we started traveling to Spain, traveling on and off to every place you couldn't possibly imagine. And then, of course, I encountered the food history of my country, little by little. And of course, as it couldn't be any other way, I fell in love with the subject and decided to carry on working and progress on that. And that's what I did. Then initially I was involved with wine. So I did my courses, my diploma at the Wine and Spirit Education Trust. But in those days, wine and women didn't go together very well. Or basically what was happening is we were discriminated all the time. So an opening was coming with the promotion of gastronomy, Spanish gastronomy in the UK, but not only in the UK. So I thought, well, that sounds really interesting. And that's how my history and my relationship with food really started. Then, out of the blue, I was asked to write a book about the life and food in the Basque Country.
Okay.
And that was an eye-opening for me. I spent 2 years traveling when I was free up and down the Basque Country and looking for history, and also, but not history of I was going to do later on for the whole of 21st century, but I was working with people about the history of people in the 1980s, 1990s, and that was the beginning. I published the book. I was asked at the Oxford Food Symposium to produce a paper, and somehow Oxford was really the beginning of my true development of passion for Spanish food culture.
Fantastic. So we have to blame you for the explosion of the Basque cuisine in the Anglosphere.
Well, put it this way, I was somebody in the right place, and Spain needed a flagship.
Yeah.
To show really what gastronomy was. And having written the book, having met while I was writing the book, somebody who will become a 3 Michelin star chef, Pedro Subijana, I got engaged of bringing him to London, which was for the first time ever that a Michelin star chef was prepared to travel and do something special in London.
Okay.
At the time, Spanish chefs didn't like to travel.
Right.
They didn't.
It's very interesting.
They didn't. So anyway, so here he came, and we became unbelievably good friends. And with his help, I wrote the book. And his help was wonderful because he introduced me to all kinds of, every single group of people that I was portraying in the book was thanks to Pedro Subijana introducing me and allowing me to travel at a time in which it was not easy traveling in the Basque Country, because it was, as you know, the situation at the time was still quite complicated. But what I found was the most wonderful people, and also what I found was the most unbelievable good food and good products.
Fantastic.
So that was really the beginning. So the beginning was a book about Basque food. And funny thing is my last book, which has just been published, is about la cocina vasca.
Fantastic.
So that's quite interesting. It's the last one is la cocina vasca. That's all the different languages in which the food book, the history of Spanish food, has been published.
La cocina vasca is just in Spanish.
Vasca, no. All my books are in English.
Okay.
The publishers decided that my books about regional Spain will have a title, big title, La Cocina. And then it will have a small explanation about what was about the book. But it's all in English.
Yeah. So congratulations. I mean, that's brand new, you said.
That is brand new. I brought, in the last 2 years, I brought La Cocina Andaluza, La Cocina de Andalucía, and La Cocina Vasca.
Brilliant. So let's talk a little bit about your book, the Delicioso, which is covering the whole of Spain. The book is divided in 8 chapters, and you kind of go through chronological order of the Spanish.
When I talk about Spanish food, when I lecture, which I do sometimes, I always have a first photograph of a pot, a big pot. And I explain to my students why and how I wrote Delicioso, which I follow this wonderful pot, which started at the beginning of the history of food, Spanish food. And then I go through every layer of the invasions they have produced, the culture, which is behind the food culture of Spain. And I thought, well, that's fine. So let's do one for every century, more or less. But it was not quite for every century because, of course, it came the time of the Arab invasion in 711. There were nearly 8 centuries. So I group it in accordance to what I consider was the incoming of people that were bringing enormous food traditions.
Yeah.
So obviously, at the very beginning, I brought the idea of the Phoenician, the Greeks, the Roman. Then, of course, it was a period that it was not so good, the Visigothic period. And then, of course, we started to enter into the discovery of America and the Americanic change and the unbelievable change in Spanish food because of course, the arrival of the American products and the Colombian exchange. So from that, I was happy with the 16th century and then 17th century. And then, of course, it came another, in medieval time, of course, we had also the Catalans started moving towards the Mediterranean. So we had lots of influence also from Italy. So initially from Greece, but then from Italy, and of course from France. And by the time that the Austrian dynasty died down and the Bourbon dynasty started, then we got another lot of influence that it will melt around the end 17th, 18th century and into the 19th century, which I like it because it was kind of historians and food writers particularly and journalists decided that we had enough of French influence and that we were going to write books also about Spanish food. So I dedicate a lot of time about that as well. And then moving along, of course, into the 20th century to the to very good chefs already there in place writing. And of course, into the 20th century and the Spanish Civil War and also what happened in the regional food of Spain because of the Civil War. And I arrived to a point that I have to really look into what was happening from the moment in which France started revolting between 76, 78. Because in France there was a complete revolution of ideas, and of course the Nouvelle Cuisine appeared. And that was the beginning of the movement of La Nueva Cocina Vasca, which really to me is the beginning and the foundation of the success of Spanish food in the last decades.
Absolutely, yeah.
So I finish having an overall view of regional Spain, talking about what had happened particularly in the 80s and 90s, and I stop with perhaps what happened when I stopped writing, which was about 2000, and I think I stopped writing in 2017.
Okay.
So what is not included, and maybe will be another book, is the history of the departure from what had happened in the 1980s and 90s, how the Basque is still absolutely progressing in their own ways, but now you can find amazing food everywhere in Spain. And to me, it really was the Basques movement, La Nueva Cocina Vasca, which originally there were 11 members, who really started changing the idea of the cuisine, to say something, because it's the la alta cocina, we say in Spanish.
Yeah.
And of course, the restaurants moving from the period of the Basques to the period of the Catalans, Adrià, this type of great innovation, great creativity.
Yeah.
And of course, now we are in a completely different moment in which, having learned, having cooked in some of the top restaurants in the world, Spanish chefs are coming back into their own regions, bringing sophistication, but adding that element of the natural way of the regional Spain and the cuisine of the mothers and the grandmothers.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, but that will be another book.
Great. Yeah, kind of looking at the now and future of Spanish food. If we peel back the layers and if we go back to the very beginning of the pot, so do we know anything about what was the food or the ingredients before the Phoenicians and the Greeks arrive?
Not very much, because, well, we do know, of course we do know, almost from prehistory, we know how food came into the peninsula. The first chapter is to do with that, how different people, how the peninsula, different people move into the peninsula. The Basques were already there, but of course remember that there were all kinds of different pueblos, different people.
Yeah.
They have come from different places, and some they were the original indigenous people of Spain. But I consider that it really is with the Phoenician who we started trading. Spain had the capacity of not only producing gold, which it did at the time, but also produce very good wheat. They could see there was wine could be easily produced. Olive oil started being produced. And of course, the Phoenicians never settled down properly in any place. They were traders.
Yeah.
So they came, they left something, they picked something. So Strabo with the Romans tell us more. And we know much more with the Romans, because Spain was a province of Rome, and it was the granary, and it was an olive oil producer by them. And, well, with the grains they could bake bread. With the bread they moved further north. And so with the Romans, at least we had Apicius that was telling us more or less what they were doing.
Yeah.
But very little things writing at the time. They were, during the Visigothic time, a bishop wrote about certain things, very little. You have to move to the 8th century with the arrival of the Arabs and Moors that you can see with the Romans. Forgive me, I'm going back a moment with the Romans. With the Romans, what we had was the Romans were unbelievably good water engineers, all the things that the country needed, the big province needed to produce more for them.
Yeah.
And that's what happened. But they introduced enormous amounts of vegetables. So we don't know so much about the recipes. We have apicius, but we don't really have books that tell us properly what was the food.
But we have some elements, some indication about the ingredients, and we know that the Romans brought more cultivation of wheat and olive oil and wine and all these products that they could be distributed across the empire.
And we know they use, bread. The military bread was very important, and in Spain they found it in the province. They really found very good wheat.
Yeah.
So that was also an important. Bear in mind that also they produce all these areas in which they transport things from. Spain had the most wonderful routes created by the Romans.
Right.
And that allowed transport, which in a very mountainous place, that was absolutely essential, and it's still essential in some way.
I mean, it's a big country, and you have like all these different provinces and all these different climates and the geographical regions. So yeah, even if you consider Spain, it's not one thing.
Oh no,
it's many things anyway.
Absolutely.
And
absolutely.
Yeah, geographically speaking, there will be areas that have that will be better suited for wheat, better suited for olive oil, vineyards, hunting game, or having.
But it took them
seafood.
200 years to conquer Spain.
Yeah.
So before they really could move properly everywhere they wanted. And they never really dominated properly the Basque country. No, the Arabs did.
Nobody does.
Nobody does.
There's something with the Basque, something unique. Excellent. So, in terms of the Carthaginians and Phoenicians, they had colonies around the periphery.
They had colonies. That's what they had.
And the Greeks, like Emporia and colonies. So
but it was not a province.
Yeah.
Like with the Romans.
Yeah, nothing like that.
It was traders.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, there was the influence. I mean, they had the colonies to trade with the other Greeks and the other Phoenicians and Carthaginian cities, and they probably brought a few things like wine and
with Africa. Carthage was very important.
Yeah.
So.
And then we have the Arabs, the Moors, that stayed for
nearly 711 to 1492.
And it was a really glorious period for food writing.
Also, there was, you realize that all during the Arab period, we had Christians, Jewish people, Sephardian people, and of course Arabs and people from Africa, people from Arabia. So it was a really fantastic blend of all kinds of things happening there. And then there were two writers in the book, which they produced 2 books in which they spoke specifically about Spanish recipes they were cooking in Al-Andalus. Al-Andalus was the whole of Spain. People think when talk about Al-Andalus, that it's only Andalusia.
Yeah.
No. Al-Andalus, the land of the Vandals, Al-Andalus.
Yes.
Well, it's very, very complex, as you say. But they wrote 2 books, and they were amazing books, in which you could find, in one, only 2 recipes, but, some of that you must read, and another one there were a little more. But we're talking about the 13th, 14th centuries. So look at, it took a long time. Of course, you have when I travel in Andalusia, which I do a lot, but having written a book about Andalusia in the last 2 years, it's amazing how much influence is still there. The spices, the way how they fry. Although the frying is more complex because also it could come from Portugal and anyway. But yes, the more I know about these 8 centuries, the more that I want to know. My name is Sevilla, so maybe some ancestors were up there. I'm not quite sure, because some of my ancestors, they come from the north. But of course, there were a lot of people from the southern provinces being taken to the north when the Arabs left and the Christians moved people, the new Christians, to other areas of Spain. So who knows who I am? Well, my nose is quite, it speaks quite loud.
Fantastic. You're listening to the Delicious Legacy podcast by me, Tom Dinas. There's more to come after the break, and it gets better. The Moors, they brought saffron, I suppose. They brought spices. They brought oranges, lemons.
What they did, which I think it was so fantastic, is they improve everything the Romans have done. They were not silly. They knew what the Romans had brought, and they have much more. The caravans were coming through Africa also, and also you have all the people from the Atlas, which were very good agricultural people, and they cultivated the land in the most unbelievable way. And we still do have rice, we have saffron, we have so many vegetables they brought on top of all the things we had from the Romans. And also they brought techniques, cooking techniques, and lots of puddings and sweet things, which you can find now the parallels in some North African countries. I love peace in Tunisia, which I can see some of, this is similar. Or maybe the origin was there of some of the things that I'm been cooking in my book about Andalusia. So look at how long has passed. So it was a long time, nearly 8 centuries. So imagine. Then it came a time which it became more complex. But because basically the Renaissance didn't, in Spain, which happened, the influence through it by Italy and all that. But then we have several wonderful books about the food of the time. And you can, it's very important. Those books on the medieval times are very, very important. 16th century, 15th, 16th century, 17th century, there is also something. And you can start understanding the big regionality of Spain and how Christianity had also trying to cover up a little bit the Arabic influence. But they could much more in the north with the influence of the Italy and southern France, but they could not completely, thanks God, evaporate what it was this southern part, the influence of the Oriental influence in Spanish food.
Do we see influence of the Jewish cooking and food?
We have something, but only a couple of recipes. So I'm a little bit concerned about books talking about Spanish food of Jewish origin. Unfortunately, where you can find Jewish food, or what happened, is during the period of the Inquisition.
Right.
Because unfortunately what happened is that Jewish people were cooking with olive oil. But not the Arabs.
Oh, okay.
And they were not. That olive oil was for the Christians and the Jews. They use animal fat, but no, of course no pigs. So of course it's interesting because they were obviously the Arabs, nor the Jewish people will use pigs within southern Spain, was part of the Christian culture in an enormous way. So again, during the terrible time of, particularly at the beginning and the middle time of the Inquisition, they, even some neighbors will say smells, and maybe the inquisitors will go and take the people. But there was very little writing, or practically very little writing. The writing comes, and that is, yes, there is, from other areas of the Mediterranean where the Jewish people have to fled, Italy and particularly Turkey.
Yeah, Constantinople.
And then you have lots of Jewish recipe, which they were Sephardim recipes.
Yeah.
Maybe slightly older, may be completely traditional, but there are people who really knows very well. But this is, for me, if I want to know what was happening in Spain and all that, I do write if I look at food history in countries in which Jewish people fled.
Okay.
That makes sense.
Yeah, of course.
It makes sense.
Yeah. And you mentioned a few books that came out in the 15th, 16th, 17th century, cookbooks.
The 15th century, well, from the 15th century, let me have a little look, and I'll show you a couple of photographs. There we are. There is two books which I liked very much. Which one? They are Catalan books, which at the time, of course, was greatly influenced. Think about the Catalan world was moving on the Mediterranean, because the Castilians wouldn't allow them to take the route of the Atlantic.
Yeah.
So now, the first book, The Life in the Castle, is the book, which I think is absolutely fundamental. It's a book called Le Libre de Coche. Coche es el cocinero. This is Le Livre de Coche. And this one, which was written by somebody called Nola, I'm trying to find exactly, so I don't want to make a mistake, about the exactly date. But we are talking about 15th century, it's 15th, 16th century. And he was a chef of an Spanish king in the court in Naples, which,
of course, was part of the Kingdom of Aragon.
Yeah, and there is a fantastic comprehensive book about all kinds of recipes that you can really, really fantastic. But we don't really know exactly who was this man, this coach. So, yeah, a couple of books to do with mostly Catalan books. The first one, definitely Catalan book. And the second one, it was printed also in Castilian.
Okay.
It was so many books printed in Castilian. Even Charles I helped the printing of a Castilian edition, so people could read it. So but it's very, it's actually pretty wonderful. And well, I will give you the book, and so you will see how absolutely important these early books were to understand what the kings were eating at the time.
Yeah.
And probably more what the kings were eating than the people in the streets, because obviously poverty was, so again, the recipes were mostly recipes written by
the cooks of the kings for the kings.
For the kings.
Yeah.
With lots and lots of meat. But in Le Livre de Coche, there is a lot of fish as well. So there is fish, there is practically everything you want to find in a cookbook. So
interesting.
Very interesting.
Very
interesting.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
So we're moving, obviously, we are in a period that the European powers go to the Americas.
That is, to me, again, that is absolutely fundamental. I would have loved to write more in Delicioso. We know quite a lot because although there were not necessarily books written about it, there were authors writing about Spanish literature, but they were mentioning some of the food they were eating. And we know, for instance, that tomatoes, which, if I recall well, didn't really were used properly in the UK or in Europe until the 19th century, or more or less. In Spain, in the 16th century, the authors were already talking about tomatoes.
Right.
Now, how there were salads of tomatoes, the daughter of Lope de Vega was actually talking about salads of tomatoes. We also know the potatoes, although, well, in the book I talk a lot about things said about who or brought the tomatoes, the potatoes to Ireland or to the UK and all that. Well, appears like the first potatoes were planted for the little flowers in the hospital, el Hospital de la Sangre. It was called the Blood Hospital in Seville. And obviously that was
the port
very
coming from the New World,
clearly there was there. And you have to understand as well that we had lots of books by the missionaries, which they wrote about the food of the Americans and the food of the, I don't know why I call Americans, because, the true owners of the whole continent.
Yeah.
They had such a wonderful histories to tell, where a tomato grew first, what happened with the pepper, so many other things, tobacco, unfortunately tobacco. But all these things that we think, the pumpkins, there were some pumpkins early, but they were completely different than the...
And chocolate, as you talk about, of the book about.
And chocolate, which definitely chocolate was cooked in the church, had a lot to do with the exchange, because they were the first ones bringing things and planting and even showing to the kings. Sort of Philip II, I think it was, or Charles the first father, first got a few the beans of the cocoa beans, and probably you know how bitter they are, and what they encounter in America, in Mexico particularly, it was a horrible drink apparently, because it had spices and all that. So it was the religious orders. There is hundreds of dozens of different potatoes. We don't know anything. We talk about 5, 6, 10, 15 varieties. We think, I remember in a congress that I was working in the United States about the American exchange, and the Peruvians gave us several big lectures on potatoes, and you feel, I don't know anything about it. I'm completely ignorant about. When I saw in Mexico City, in the market, the different types of peppers, and I think that Spain is incredibly rich in peppers, and I think we probably have, I don't know, 10, 12 varieties that we have now. Well, a visit to any market in Mexico, and you think, I have no a clue. I haven't got a clue. I'm not sure what I'm talking about. Anyway, so all of that.
I mean, I love all this stuff in the book, but we could move on a little bit later, because I mean, the things that I didn't know much about the later centuries of Spanish food, like the 19th century and the 20th century, and you kind of you paint a very nice picture of what happens in Spain at that time. There's a very nice book that it comes later, like the Dionisio Perez book, The Diversity of Spanish Food. But that's a bit later. But talk to me, what's going on in the 19th century in Spain? How is the food scene and the world there?
It's a complex century in Spain in which there is festival. It was the food of the rich and the food of the poor. The food of the rich was mostly French. All the restaurants, even in my lifetime, in Madrid, in my lifetime, in the embassy, they were doing things in French, which I was horrified. Not at the time, but before my time. But they were all written in French.
Yeah.
Because that was the thing, and whatever. And it was all this Dionisio Perez, there is, listen, we could really talk about forever.
Forever, yeah.
But there is a number of authors that they really were dedicated to trying to, there were women as well.
Yes.
Pardo Bazán, all these people.
You write about that on the book.
Yeah. But even so, they were also, some of them were also still influenced by France. But it was this belief that it have to be rescued, the Spanish food, which already had appeared regional, with the Spanish ingredients, with methods of cooking, quite a rich quantity of different cuisines appearing. And they started writing about it. And that was absolutely fantastic. I felt that was the beginning of what it was going to happen later. And also it was, sort of it was a very complex period, particularly when you think the Spanish Empire was collapsing completely. In 1898, Spain lost Cuba and the Philippines. And that was the end, really, a part of the little things there in Africa. That was the end of the Spanish empire.
Yeah.
And somehow journalists, food writers needed to find an identity. And they felt that through food, they could find an identity. And this is what you find in that period, is searching from the nationalistic concept of, yes, we are a nation. Yes,
What are we? What is Spain?
We are a nation. We are a nation with different areas, enormously rich, because we have all these climatic differences, all different invaders that have come through the early history of the country. And we really, well, today, we are still fighting on this, but the reality is that, for me, and my belief and my book, Spain is plural. It's a nation of nations.
Absolutely.
And if you travel in Spain and you really dipped in, not just go to Barcelona to see the cathedral and that, no, but if you started eating in the markets and talking to the people and all that, you very soon realize how different we are. Although we were in the peninsula, and of course, but we are very different. And while today we eat more and more on a similar way, when I think about my youth and when I feel very down or things like that, I cook lentils or I cook hake in green sauce.
Of course.
I go back to my roots. I have an excellent cook. My mother was an excellent cook. My grandmother was a professional cook. And so I grew up with very good food. It was not French food at all. It was mostly from Navarra, which was my family came, Navarra and Aragon, but transported to Madrid.
Yeah.
So with the things that was happening in Madrid. But it's interesting how, by writing now into the Cocina Vasca and writing very much about Navarra, how I found, for instance, vegetables the other regions of Spain don't know.
Right. Like?
Today, for instance, they know it, but they not necessarily
Cook with it.
cook it.
Yeah.
Cardoon,
Mm.
but not little cardoons like that. But these massive, beautiful cardoons, some of them are pink cardoons.
And big ones.
And when they cook well with an almond sauce, which is a Christmas dish, that Christmas dish is ancient with the almond sauce. Borage. People think of borage with the little flowers. No, when I think of borage, I think a vegetable, which it looks well, with big leaves and stalks, but it doesn't look like the little flowers. They had little flowers, but
of course,
this is a vegetable. And that was what my mother loved more in the world.
Really?
Was this.
Wow.
And yeah. So 19th century was very important in finding a space for a nationalistic point of view, which, listen, it had happened before, eh?
Yeah.
16th century as well. We're trying to find a nationalistic way. But 19th century was quite important because politically, Spain was changing or needed to change or needed to adapt or needed to start feeling happy with itself.
You are listening to the Delicious Legacy podcast by me, Tom Dinas. There's more to come after the break, and it gets better. There was poverty, and it was the end of the empire. There was poverty in the late 19th century.
Tremendous.
Yeah.
Tremendous. And you can see that. But it's interesting, Strabo wrote about the Iberian pigs and the fact that they ate acorns. That was Strabo, which is pretty old. So we have never stopped eating wonderful ham. And if we can afford a Iberico, which that's what I live in the middle of the most wonderful sierra, which is a dehesa, the forest where the pig is. And my neighbors are pigs, mostly pigs. Because and don't take it wrong, not my neighbors, no pigs. Pigs, my neighbors, because they come every day and I always find a little something, and the little ones are so cute and so intelligent that you think, I'm going to eat them. But
I know what you mean. I know.
Yeah. But anyway, so coming back again to the 19th century, and then we had books. We had quite a few books, and we had also quite a few chefs. The moving between the 19th century and the 20th century, and important chefs. One or two, a Catalan one who wrote the best Basque book, and many others. But again, they were concentrating in trying to, not all of them, because they were still writing about French food, of course.
French food.
It's natural because we never had, and this is very important, we never had a French Revolution as such. We never have we never had really any movement. But what we did have is, after the revolution, many chefs moved south to trying to find jobs or to open restaurants.
Yeah.
And many landed in the Basque Country because the Spanish aristocracy were always having holidays in the Basque Country.
Right.
And they love French food.
That makes some sense now, because I'm thinking why Basques are so amazing in food.
No, because what it is fascinating is the reason why Basque is so fascinating is because Basque people loves to cook, and they are enormous eaters. And everybody cooks, and they don't mind to pay more money in food than in anything else. But they all compete for the best dish. That is a fact that I studied really at length and very much. And that is what has been my last book, trying to really understand what has happened in Spain and what has happened in the Basque Country.
Basques also were great fishermen, right?
Absolutely.
They were the ones that
Absolutely.
were going to get the cod from the
The cod.
Newfoundland.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But they still do the most wonderful dishes with cod. People think the salted cod is horrible. Well, salted cod can be really horrible if you don't know what to do with it.
Yeah.
If you know what to do with it, even raw can be amazing.
Okay.
I've been putting 1 or 2 salads with my own cod, which I buy, and I put for an hour with a little salt. It's because I don't like very, very salty.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
then I have that little saltiness that I adore. And it works very well. Because now in Spain you can buy cod. If you go to good places to go is Barcelona market, Catalonia in general, because they have lots and lots of cod recipe and also in the Basque Country, of course, all over the place. But again, cod has been with Spain throughout history because, with the oreography that we had, you couldn't transport fish. They did, but you imagine how it arrived.
Yeah.
Traveling from the coastal areas to the capital.
It's a long way.
It's a long way, but they did it. The fact is, one, it was salted and dry. And then, of course, it was the church saying, you cannot have meat in this and this every Friday, every Saturday, whatever it was, but you can have fish. So you imagine if you could have fish, that was, and obviously it was not as expensive as fresh fish. So, and fresh fish in Madrid, for instance, with the little poor rivers they are in Madrid, nobody,
you won't have fish.
I don't think they will be fishing for anything. So that's how to the capital came the fish from the coastal areas, particularly from the north.
Yeah, especially from there.
But also happening, of course, in the Mediterranean, because they had also tuna. But the red meat of the red tuna that comes to the Straits on his way to the Mediterranean, which is full of fat, and it's an experience that people who like fish must have. But also it's incredibly healthy. So yes, so you find that in Cádiz. I love Cádiz, and Cádiz has a fantastic food history because what it was, and the connection with the American exchange, Cádiz and Sevilla,
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. So anyway, so if we move into the 20th century, I think I mentioned to you that all started, Basque food had, as delicious as it was kind of just, this is it. You could put it in a square. There is no evolution. It's these things, this is how we use ingredients, and not everything was good because some of the fish was overcooked, some of the vegetables were overcooked. So in France, the movement of the Nouvelle Cuisine was going to have an immense influence in the Basque chefs. And in 1976, 2 Spanish chefs, which are incredibly famous, both with 3 Michelin stars from a long time ago, Pedro Subijana and Juan Mari Arzac, were invited to Lyon to a conference about the Nueva Cocina Francesa, the Nouvelle Cuisine. And they, coming back to Spain, they thought, goodness, if we apply certain concepts, if we modernize our Basque food with our amazing ingredients, we could have a Nueva Cocina Vasca. And that's what they did, 11 of them. And I really treat this well in the book because I think it's essential to understand today.
That's not something that you find in other, like even books or TV programs about Basque cuisine. Like that's something that's you mention, you make a lot of it. That
yes,
nobody else does.
Because I think that that's very important. Then, of course, it comes the Catalans, and with
Fair.
the ultimate. But I think, with the exception of Santi Santa Maria, which again, it was defending the food of Catalonia, but not the extreme creativity and evolution of that. But his dishes, stunning. And yet, all these new chefs, El Bulli, all these things were creating a very strong noise about Spanish food.
Yes.
And that, we were already in the 1990s. It started in the 76, 77, 78. 78 is when the Nova Cocina Vasca starts. Then El Bulli was after this.
Yeah.
And then the Catalan chefs started really strong, doing fascinating things. And then, of course, it has permeated. They've been training a lot of people, and the Basque as well. And little by little, those chefs were moving to their own areas.
Yeah.
And I have seen in the last 15 years, 16 years, I have seen how these days you go anywhere in Spain and you will find a good restaurant. You might find others that they are not fantastic, but you will see that even the more modest ones are beginning to really understand, well, I'm very proud.
Yeah, of course.
The what has happened in Spain and how well I eat in Spain. It's a very complex history. We could dedicate hours and hours and hours because
absolutely.
it really, we have just touched on the surface. Anyway.
Yeah, so we are in a situation, Spanish food has a great name across the world now, especially the English-speaking world, like Britain and America, like Spanish food is very much now up there, like the best cuisine in the world in a sense.
One of the best.
One of the best, but at least it went on the top ones in the last 20 years or so. And that's obviously the quality of the ingredients as well, not only the quality of the chefs. And
the Spanish food, they will go forward. It will be totally Spanish, with a beautiful lift, using the best ingredients you can find, gently cooked, with moderation in the spiciness, in the sauces, moderation, but at the same time, this capacity to produce those flavors that will retain in your memory for years to come. And that I'm finding now in my country.
That's brilliant.
And I wish the Richard IV of the 19th century, Richard IV, will be alive now and will talk about, in his wonderful book about Spain, about the food today, the regional food of Spain today.
Yeah.
And I'm going to leave you just with one thought. I was writing, not about the Basque Country, I was writing about Asturias, which is next to the Basque Country. And I was invited by a chef, which now is a 3 Michelin star chef, from a lovely place called Arriendes, that I came with a camera to do an interview with him. And we were in the kitchen, and we were in an area which all the noises couldn't be heard because, the kitchens. Yeah. And it had been the sous chef, so we are talking about already, had put the fillets of sardines on a beautiful marble place, filleted to perfection, all just like that. And I started talking to my chef, and he will answer me and that. But then of course, what he was doing is with a finger, it was just going through every single loin of the sardine, putting the skin to perfection. Then they had a plancha, but just for this, and they cook the sardines in a way they would not disturb the beauty of the skin. And they had a gentle marinating just on top for a second or two.
Yeah.
So it was practically raw. It was absolutely divine. This is ridiculous story.
It is.
But I think it illustrates that when you have the sardines were caught the same morning, brought to the restaurant, gutted, filleted, and then some of them were being preserved in olive oil and they were again absolutely divine. And you think, well, if a sardine is worth
That treatment.
time.
Yeah.
And people is prepared to pay for a sardine, maybe we don't need to eat turbot all the time.
True. Thank you so much, Maria. That was a lovely conversation.
Thank you.
And your book Delicioso is out now, and I urge everybody to get it.
You will find all of that.
Yeah.
It's all there. It took me 7.5 years to write this book. 7.5 years.
Amazing.
It's 25 years traveling in Spain.
It shows. It's full of beautiful detail.
Good. Well, thank you.
Okay, our delicious adventure through the culinary world of Spain has ended. Thanks for listening, and thanks to María José Sevilla for her time and all the tantalizing morsels of food history that she shared with us from her book Delicioso, A History of Food in Spain, which took her 7.5 years to write, and of course is out now by Reaction Books, and the paper as a hardback, and the paperback edition is coming out this summer. If you want to get the episodes early and ad-free, please subscribe on my Patreon page, and please rate and review wherever you get your podcast from, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Acast, Pocket Casts, and so on. That way the word spreads around more to more people across different platforms. And please tell your friends and family and colleagues about the podcast and share it far and wide with as many people as possible. This podcast can only exist with your generous support, either through Patreon or ko-fi.com, or of course by sharing this episode with your friends and family. Thanks for listening. I've been Thomas Dinas, and this was the Delicious Legacy Podcast. This episode was the last for this season, and I'll take a short break and restart fairly soon with many more interesting culinary adventures from the past and present, of course. See you soon. Love you lots. Bye.